Alright guys, here we are in Moho. I'm just starting out with a blank canvas and a new file, and we're just going to do something really simple here. So first things first, I'm not going to go through and explain the entire interface or every function of the software. It's just going to be the things that we're actually using, and that'll be it. So we're going to start over here with our little vector pen tool. We already have a vector layer set up over here in the bottom. So now we're just going to draw a few lines. So to start with, we're just going to make a bit of shoulders here. And if you notice, it's just a line. If yours looks this way, it's because it's not a shape yet. And I believe, if I zoom in, it is a shape. It is just a line, though. We're not closing it off. We're not making any kind of shape out of that. There are more points than we need, but we'll be dealing with that here in a minute. So back to our little pen tool. Just going to make a T shape, and then across the bottom we'll have this other bit. Now I'm going to zoom in. You can do that using your little magnifying glass over here. It zooms in, not the camera, but zooms into the canvas. And you can see we have more points that we need. So there's a few ways we can handle that. The first way we can do this, though, is to go and click on our layer, make sure that we have these controls up here, and you can see right here this is called point reduction. We're going to start with that. Just click on it and come over here to where your lines are. You can see my mouse trailing behind my other one here. But if you just go over this, it will make a red shape like so, and it will reduce the amount of points that you have on there that are needed to make the particular shape you have. It does an okay job, but it doesn't do as much as we need it to do. So I'm going to click on my little marquee select and just kind of tap or drag on the side to deselect everything. Now click on move, because this is kind of works like your selector as well. There are also other ways you could do this, but you can tell there are multiple points at the end of this here. If I click and drag one, it just moves it away from these others. We don't want all those points. That's ridiculous. So with one selected, you can just delete it. You can click on another one, delete it, click on another one, and just keep going until we have this line. And don't worry that it's now just a line. We just want to get rid of all the ones that we don't need. There's probably too many in this point. Oh, it seems to be okay. So now that this is just a line, we're going to have to fix that. Real simple. You just kind of drag with your marquee tool across that line, and where you can see these fill buttons down here. This particular one, you want to go to the second one over, which is your actual shape, and it says right here, create shape. Just click on that with those highlighted. It creates your line back. Because we don't have a shape that needs to be filled in, it won't create a fill. It's just creating the line. I know I'm going a little fast, but hopefully you can keep up. So now that we're going to continue, we're just going to select on our little move tool there, tap on the screen, it deselects everything. And we can go in and select points here once again and just click delete, and it'll delete the extra points. We have a bunch down here too, it looks like. So we're going to delete those. We're going to delete that one. Okay. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but it's okay. A couple problems going on here. This particular one is not connected to this one, but if you drag it and click over the other one, it makes a little red dot. When you let go, you should hear a click sound, and now it's connected to that line. Second problem, this one, look how thin this line is here. We don't want that. There's another tool over here that you can use right here, and it's called the line width tool. You just click on that, and now when we click and drag this point, it'll make it thicker or thinner, however you need that to be. I'm just going to make it pretty close to the other one, and there we go, good to go. Now you can see that these are kind of wavery, and that depends on each point, and it's the way each Bezier handle is turned per point. So what I mean by that is if I click on my selection here and I click on the point, and then I click on this little guy here, which is called the Curvature Tool, as soon as I click on that, you can see that these points have handles now, and if you turn them, they control the curvature. So we're just going to select this little button here. That is the peak button, and it just turns this point into that type of a point. It won't have the Bezier handles anymore. We want to do that with this bottom one as well if we can. Just click the peak button, and it makes everything nice and straight. You can do that with all these for now. Now there may be some other cases where we don't want that, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Now this one seems to have an extra piece on it than oh, actually it was just the handle sticking out. You can see here. So we click on the peak again, goes straight. This one too, goes straight. This one straight again. Just keep clicking on the peak tool and it will take care of all those points. So there's probably a simpler way of doing this, but it's how I tend to work. And remember, this is about how I would do it. So once we have this sorted out, we need to draw some arms and legs and a head. This is a particular layer here, though, where everything we've drawn is on the same layer. So everything is part of the same object or layer. We're going to rename that layer by double-clicking on it. It should bring up, I brought this into my other screen, should bring up your layer properties or layer settings like this. We're just going to call this one body and click apply and or OK. And now it's called body. That's simple. So we're going to make a new layer where we can put our limbs. So we will go up here to this button here and click new layer. We want to choose vector. And on there, let's just go ahead and name it. We can call this right leg, or actually leg underscore R. And this is the best way to name stuff. It's best naming convention to use because it tells you what it is first. If you need to find a leg, you look up leg, and then right next to it, you can tell if it's the right one or left one. If you put right leg, everything's going to be under R or L, and it will just get mixed up. So on leg right, we're going to go back to our trusty freehand tool. We're going to zoom back out on the timeline, or not on the timeline, I'm used to editing. We're going to zoom back out on our canvas here, and we're going to draw our right leg. Now when I refer to right leg and left leg, I mean his right leg. If you pick his left leg as our right side of the screen, when he turns around, it's not going to apply anymore and everybody's going to get confused. So we're just going to make this right leg as one piece, and we're probably, let's go ahead and include the foot. What the heck? Actually, let's make the foot on a separate layer. I take that back. So we're going to do the right leg like from here down like so. Now we have too many points again. Let's use our methods. Go and pick our point reduction tool, swipe over it and see if it does any good. And if you need to remove more, just deselect like so and pick the points you want to get rid of. Select on them, delete them, select it, delete it, and select it and delete it. But we needed that one, so we'll undo that. Once again, go into your curve points, your curvature tool, your points, click on the tool, turn these into peaks for now because we just need them to be static or straight angles. So that way now when you move it, you can see it's just a really sharp angle. And we're going to do the same thing again. However, we're going to duplicate this instead of redrawing it so that it's the same. Easy way to do that is just to go right down here on your layers panel and click on the duplicate layer button. It'll create another one. We want to immediately rename that to layer underscore L because it's the left leg. Make sure that that layer is selected when you're drawing. You want to make sure that your layer that you need to be on is the one you're actually drawing on. And we're going to take that duplicate and we're going to actually flip it horizontally. So if you right click, I believe, actually no, double click on the layer, you have this option right in here called flip horizontal. We're going to check that, click apply and OK, and you can see that it's right out here. The way I like to do it is just sort of highlight, select the 3 points and move that over to where it needs to go. That's the simplest, quickest way I know to do that. And now we're going to do the arms. So guess what? We need another layer. So we're going down here to the layers panel again and click plus and vector. We want to add a vector layer, and this is going to be arm underscore R, arm right. And we're going to draw that with our little pen tool again. I'm just going to start where it needs to be started, come down and do this like so. Go to our points reduction tool and reduce those points as much as we can with that. It just saves some time. Then we're going to deselect everything, select, and delete the points that we don't want, just like that. And move these to where they might need to go, because this is the move tool we're using. Everything looks good. And to keep all those weird curvy things from happening, we use our curvature tool, select the point, and just make that a peak instead of a curved point. And once again, we're going to duplicate the arm right layer, doink, and we're going to change that to arm, I don't know why that keeps opening, we're going to change that to arm L. And we now are going to double click on that layer to open it up, and we can click on the flip horizontal checkbox, apply, OK. We're going to drag select all those points and move them over to where they go. That's simple. Hope you guys are following along. If not, pause it, do it, pause it, do it, or rewind, come back, do it again. Once that is done, you have that pretty much aligned. We're going to now need a layer for the neck. And you could make this part of the head if you want, but I like to do them separately. So we're going to create a new vector layer. We're going to name it neck, and you don't need an underscore because there is only one neck. It's like Highlander, there can be only one. And you'll make the little neck here, like so. We're going to need to reduce those polygons, so just go through here. And if somebody has a different way of doing this to where I can literally draw a line and only create 2 points from the get-go, let me know. I have yet to find out how to do that. So we're going to zoom in where all those points are so we can see this better. And see all these extra points we don't need. We're going to deselect everything, and we're going to go in and delete the ones we don't want. And we can kind of pull these up and around and see, this is not good, this is not good. Get rid of that guy, get rid of this guy. It's going to turn into just a line. We don't want that either. So we select both those points. We select our shape tool here, and up here, this create shape button will appear because we have this selected and we have this create or this shape button selected. We're going to create shape, and it's going to give us our stroke and everything back. So once again, go into the curves. Well, let's click off of that and go into our curves and create peak points for those like that. Now we have our neck. Seems like a lot of steps, but it's the fastest way I know. So now we're going to zoom back out a bit and using our hand tool reposition here, and we're going to create another layer for the head. So another vector, just plus button vector. We're going to call this head. I usually capitalize every layer, but I've forgotten here. And we're now going to use this little button here. This is for creating a shape, and it is called, amazingly enough, draw shape. So we're going to have these options up here at the top for different shapes. Obviously, anything that you draw is going to create what it says it's going to draw. Undo that. So if you have a triangle, it's going to make a triangle, and so on. We are going to use a circle, and I'm going to turn off autofill because it will draw the stroke, it will draw the fill. We're going to turn off the fill to where it's just a stroke without anything on the inside of it. And just come down here and draw an oval approximately centered over the head. Now, we want to deselect our points. I click on my little marquee tool and just drag the background. It's a quick way to do it. And we're going to select one point by selecting our move tool here. We're going to drag this point. Instead of dragging, we're just going to highlight and select it. And then I'm going to use my curve points tool here and slightly pull those sides in to where we have more of an angled chin at the bottom of that shape. You can see it's kind of pointed now. And that's that. So this is just a really basic head, no eyes, no nothing. So there's our head. Let's just zoom back out. We can see everything. Just going to move around with my hand tool there to reposition this. I know there's a better way to do it that I'm not doing. That's probably a little faster. It's just the way I'm working right now and kind of the way I've gotten used to doing it. So now we need feet. So let's go ahead and add another layer for one of the feet. You're a pro at adding layers now, I'm sure. So we're going to go foot underscore R. That would be for the right foot. I don't know what I've got an M doing in there, but I'm going to go foot underscore R. And we're going to go back to our pen tool, and we're going to draw his right foot. Just a line like that. You can zoom in and delete some of those points using our little simplify tool there. Go in here. Oops, we need to deselect everything and start figuring out where all these extra points are. I kind of wish it didn't do this by default, but it does. So I'm just going to take off all these extras. Look at all that. So many points that were unnecessary. Don't know why it does it, but here's another quick way of doing it. Just take off most of them by marquee selecting them, deleting them. You can even get rid of that guy, which probably ruins our foot entirely. So here we go. Let's try it one more time. That will probably help. Okay, and so we take our little tool, minimize those points. That actually worked for the most part, I believe, though. Yeah, we're good to go. Now, remember our line width tool? We're going to need it here because our foot is really skinny toward the ankle. Let's go ahead and just size that up a bit now, like to here. And you can see the curve in the foot, which is kind of cool, but that's not what we're working with right now. We're going to go ahead and get our curves tool, and we're going to select peak for that guy and peak for that guy. And looks like we have a point that it didn't. Okay, now we're good to go. So once again, we're going to take that foot, we're going to duplicate it with the duplicate button. We're going to change the name over to foot L underscore L, and then we're going to move that. But before we do it, we need to double click the layer, flip horizontal, say OK, and now we can marquee select it and move it into place. So this is a really simple character and a really simple way of doing it. One of the fastest ways I know of doing it. So hopefully this will work for you. And hopefully I'm not going too fast. So if you notice, this guy's really ugly. It'd be kind of cool if he looked a little more hand-drawn. One way we can do that is to change the layer style. We probably should have done it when we first started drawing, but I will give you a little kind of a tip on how to do that. So instead of selecting over here for our like drawing tool, we're going to go select the shape over here. This is actually our fill tool, so this is selecting a shape. And what we want to do is select, and I don't know why there's a gradient on that. There really should not be. We're going to select our shape, and you can see it highlights in a weird pattern like that. And what we're going to do is, so we're going to select our foot like that, and it's going to have this weird pattern. And we're going to go over to the right where it says no brush here while it's in this pattern, and we're going to click no brush. And it's going to bring up a dialog box that looks like this for your brush settings. You can scroll up and down. It's got a few different types here. There's a few that I like, but if you select something kind of chunky, you can kind of see here what it's going to do to your line down here in the bottom, like so. You can adjust the jitter angle and the spacing and all that kind of stuff. I like to pick something that looks a little more pencily or warbly like you're seeing right there. You can space these out a little bit more or less or whatever you want. And then we click OK. That's going to apply that style to that stroke. Now, if you had a whole bunch of strokes, you should really do this from the beginning and start drawing all your lines that way, like you could do right here, like so. It's the way I should have told you how to do it. We'll go ahead and speed up the video here as I go through and choose each stroke with this fill tool, with this shape tool, to where they, and I have to choose them on their respective layers. But I'm going to select each one of the layers, then each one of the parts with this shape tool, and change each layer style to where the stroke looks the same. Alright, so all of that's done. Now I'm going to zoom back out, have a look at our character. He looks slightly pencil drawn, which is what we want. And now we're going to make him a little bit better by changing some of the thicknesses of certain parts of his body. So it is just a pencil sketch, and you don't have to do this, but this is something that would make him a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. So let's start with his right foot. We're just going to take our line width tool and make the line closest to his ankle a little bit thicker. And let's go with the right leg now. And we're going to make the hip thicker. Make the knee a little bit thinner than that and leave it like so. So now it's got a little shape to it. We're going to do the same thing with the left leg. Make it a little wider at the hip, a little bit wider at the knee. He's got some volume to that. So now if we go to his left foot, make the ankle a little bit thicker. We had both of those selected, you notice. So if you deselect and only select the one you want, you can control just that one point. Just make sure when you're changing things or moving things or doing the line width like I'm doing here that you have only the points selected that you want to change. So now on the body, we'll go ahead and select and update some of these on the hips. You could even leave the middle one less, but I think I want to beef up his body a little bit like so. So making his shoulders a little bigger. You can leave the middle thinner. I think that works all right. It's not a bad thing. Gives him a little dimension though. Then we go and take care of the arms. The right arm. Notice I'm leaving the hand thin. It's not really a hand, but the end of his arm. Do the same thing over here. We had all those selected, so we need to deselect. Only touch the ones that we want to now. Oops. Just using the line width tool. Make that a little bit thinner, and then of course making the hand a lot thinner. There we go. And now on to the neck and head. So the neck, just beef it up a little, beef it up a little. Can be the same all the way up. And the head can probably pretty much be the same all the way as well. So I'm gonna, well, let's select just the top pieces here, the top points, and make those thicker than the chin. So that's not too bad. All right, so now we have our character drawn. And you notice I moved him only because I'm moving the points that make up his head. Now you can animate him that way. And I can show you that, but it's a lot more difficult to keep track of your form and shape and volume and the length of your particular body parts. So if I went into frame 1 here and just kind of said this is where I want his ankle to be, you notice only the ankle is moving. I move to frame 24 and I pull it here, and then I pull this guy here, let's say. I would have to go back and move the foot also, but now don't get me wrong, it works because it's animating between this keyframe and this keyframe that we just made. But you have to do that for every point and every body part. And sometimes it's a lifesaver given the situation. You do need to animate some points, but not in this case. There's an easier way. So I'm going to marquee select. You saw me do that. I marquee selected my keyframes using that same marquee select tool. And as they're highlighted in red, I'm going to press delete and get rid of all those. Something really important to point out before we move on. All of the setup, all of the drawing and everything we're doing needs to happen in frame 0. Your animating starts at frame 1 and goes through your timeline, but all the setup, including adding bones and drawing it out and everything you're going to include in here, really needs to happen in frame 0. So if something goes wrong and you don't know what's happening, something won't move, something won't animate, something won't add or delete or change, go to frame 0. Make sure you're in frame 0 first. I've had the problem a lot. So now that we have all of our body parts here laid out, now we're going to create what's called a bone layer. Basically, you're going to create a group with all these parts in it and then add a skeleton to that group. So you would shift select all of the parts here. As you can see, right click, and you want to group with selection. Now it's going to group it together. We're going to call this dude. How about that? Dude. Now dude can be moved around completely all together now because we're moving the group and not the individual parts. The individual parts still exist in there as separate layers. You can see that's his foot. But when you select the dude group, it's moving the whole thing. Now we want to change this over to a bone layer before we can add any bones to it. So on the highlighted dude layer, we want to right click and click convert to bone. And amazingly, nothing happens. But actually it does. If you notice over here on the left side, you now have new tools for bones. On the bone layer, you want to make sure dude, or your bone layer, whatever it's called, is selected. That's the top one that all these other shapes are inside of. And then we want to add some bones. Whatever we add a bone to will be parented to that bone. And that includes other bones. So right now we're going to click on this icon here that has a plus. That's an add bone. And we want to create what I call a root bone. And we'll just click here and drag it out. And that makes a bone here, which we'll use as the root bone. So up here is the name of that bone. They're calling it B1 by default. We're going to highlight that and call it root. And click enter. And now it's named root. We can also choose to show that name next to the bone if we want to. It's up to you, but if we click on the select bone tool right next to it, you can see it says root here and has all these other options. We'll just click show label, and now it says root right next to that bone. It's kind of hard to read right now, but we can change that too by just clicking on this, I believe that's transform bone. And on transform bone, this will just move the bone around. It won't affect the bone as far as how it affects the puppet. It just affects the placement of the bone. So we can rotate the bone by clicking where we can see this rotate icon appear. We can lengthen and shorten the bone by clicking on this end here. And we can move the bone by selecting on this guy here. And now we can read that it says root. So, and all of these options up here apply to whatever we've done here. You can also enter them numerically if you want, but enough of that. We have a root bone. That root bone will control how this guy moves. Right next to this transform bone tool that we just used is called manipulate bones. If we click on that, now we can manipulate our bones with that tool. So you can see that moving this bone moves the character. Right now though, the root bone, this big red capsule around it, signifies how much power that bone has. A root bone doesn't need any power because it won't be directly manipulating any of the layers. So we can go to this tool here, which is our bone strength tool. Click on it, and then click and drag to reduce that power of that bone to 0. Once again, now we're going to make sure that this bone is highlighted. It is because it is in red. You can tell if you click off of it, it's now in blue, it means it's not selected. So if we select this bone, make sure it's in red, everything we draw after that will be parented to that bone first, then the subsequent bones. To add a bone, we go to the Add Bone tool, second button from the to the right of that one, and we're going to add our base spine bone. So we're just going to click and drag up a ways, and that creates a bone. That one is now parented to the root bone. Because this bone we just drew is red, when we draw the next bone, it will be parented to this one. So we just, at the end of it, click and drag a new bone. And that one will be parented to the one before. Now we're going to draw another one that will be parented to this one. Click and drag another bone. I'm probably drawing way too many bones for this, but let's just go up to the middle chest here, and that's more than enough. That was my cat. Okay, so now we're going to draw arm bones. We don't need shoulder bones because if we add them, it just gives us the ability to manipulate the shoulders, but we don't need that for this example. So we're going to draw from the shoulder to the elbow, and then from the elbow to the hand. Don't worry that these bones here are overlapping. They're not interfering with each other and have nothing to do with each other at this point. Now, if I was to start drawing the other arm over here, the problem is this forearm bone here would now be parented to this bone over here. That'll cause a lot of problems. There's a couple ways around that I will show you, but the easiest way is to go to your select bone tool, click on the one you want it to be parented to first, then add a bone, and it will be parented to that bone you had selected previously. If for some reason though you mess this up, and let's say this bone over here was selected, and I went ahead and added my forearm bone like this, this is going to make things not move right. And I'm not going to show you how that is going to affect right now, but what you want to do is reparent that bone. Very, very simple to do. Make sure the bone that you want to fix is highlighted, like this one right here. You click on this button, which is reparent, and it'll show you everything that is parented to everything else. This bone is parented to the chest. This bone is parented to the chest. You can see the arrows. This bone is parented to the upper arm. However, this bone is parented to this bone, and it should be parented to that one. Well, with the reparent bone button selected, you just click on the bone you want to parent it to, and it changes it. That's it. Very simple. We're going to go back to select bone selection mode, and now we've got everything set up correctly. The root is here. It will move around the entire skeleton. and all the skeleton will move around all of its subsequent bones. So just to show you how it works, if I select on the Manipulate Bones tool, you can see our power is way too big for all of these bones. We'll change that. But when I move this bone, it moves stuff. If I move the backbone here, it moves the whole character because it's not set right. If I move this one, it moves that. And everything is happening incorrectly. There's a lot of distortion because we don't have the power of the bones set correctly, and we have not done one more step after that. So we'll just go back to select bones. That'll straighten everything out. We need to change the power of these bones, but we'll do it after the fact, after we're done with this next step. I'm going to pan up here to the head, and we're going to select the chest bone because that's the one we want to parent the next bone to. And we're going to add the neck bone from here. And then we're going to add another bone from the base of the head to the tip of the head for the head. So go back to bone selection. Actually, let's go ahead and pan up so we can see the entire figure. You can even zoom out if that's necessary, but I kind of want to stay zoomed in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. But we want to select with the bone select tool that base bone of the spine again. And then when we add bones, it's going to parent this bone to that base of the spine. So the upper leg, and now this next one is going to be parented to the upper leg and then to the foot. Done. So select the base of your spine again and add the bones for the left leg. 1, 2, and 3. Easy. And they don't have to be absolutely perfect at this stage. This is a tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit, and we'll see that we have our entire character with his skeleton. Now, this skeleton is not parented correctly to the actual layers that make up our character. It's just parented correctly to each other bone, to itself. So what we have to do is tell it how to be bound to each one of these layers. Now, there's a couple different methods we're going to use. First one, and probably the easiest, is going to be layer binding. Each layer is its own separate layer, is its own separate part and image. Some of these are all together on the same layer, like the shoulders and backbone and hips. That's all on one layer, but it will be all considered one object because of that. However, it does have multiple bones that are going through it, and there's a special way that we'll deal with that. But first of all, let's just parent the head and neck to their own respective layers. So I select the head layer, which is going to bring up the head points here. Not that that's necessary for those points to be selected, but we need to select the head layer. And then when we select this nifty bone tool down here called Bind Layer, if we select any of these bones, that head layer is going to be parented to that bone. So click on the head layer, click on the head bone, and it turns bright red because now it's letting you know that layer is parented to that bone. If we go to the neck now, since we're already selecting on the Bind Layer tool, we don't have to do anything else. We select the neck and then we click on the neck bone. It's done. The rest of these, though, we're going to use, well, actually, let's go ahead and do the feet because they are going to use the same method before I get ahead of myself. So foot left, we're going to select the left foot bone. And for foot right, we're going to select the right foot bone. There we go. Like I said, when it turns bright red, you know you've got it. So now we're going to use a different method for the rest of the parts. The arm is all one layer, but it has 2 bones. If we tried to do bind layer, it would only bind to one of those bones. Unless I'm wrong, whoever knows if I'm wrong, go ahead and correct me. Our bone layer that we renamed Dude. It brings up all of our bone tools again. What we're going to do is select a bone or a group of bones and then tell it what layer we want it to bind to. So it's kind of the reverse of the Bind Layer tool. We select the bones first here. So we select this bone and this bone, and this is of the right arm. Then we go over to our right arm layer is, and I only ever use this shortcut. However, you can use the menu as well. The way you would do it in the menu is to go to bone and use selected bones for flexi binding, but I like to use the shortcut that is Control-Shift-F. So that's what we're going to do. We select those bones. We make sure our layer that it's going to bind to is selected, which is arm right, and we go Control-Shift-F, and it turns bright red to show you that those are now bonded to that layer. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select these bones of the left arm, and we're going to select the layer of left arm and Control-Shift-F. That is now bound to that side. For the body, you want to make sure we do not select the neck. We're just going to select the back bones. There are no pelvis or shoulder bones because we didn't make them. We don't need them. With those selected, now we're going to need to go to the body layer and Control-Shift-F. And just do the same thing for the legs. We're selecting the legs, and that's going to be the right leg, leg right, Control-Shift-F. See how that naming convention works? And now we're selecting the left leg, so we go to leg, L, Control-Shift-F, and everything is now bound either by layer binding or flexi binding. One thing we didn't do is control the power of our bones. That's really important. Before you can do anything with bones, though, we have to click on our bone layer again. Remember the bone power tool? Look at the power of these bones. Look at the power of these muscles. Now, the bones are obviously way too powerful. If we try to move anything now, it's going to move everything. They're overlapping. They're huge. So you just click on this bone strength tool, and on the bone, you click left or right to move those, to shrink and grow the size of the strength of each one of those bones. You just want to make sure you click on the respective bone you want to change. Click on the power and change it. You can actually do this without clicking back on the select bone layer, but just make sure that it overlaps your drawing enough to where it's not going to leave any of it out if you can help it. It just makes it work better. So once again, everything taken down, and yet again, your root bone does not need any power at all. Make sure that that is always off. So I'm just going to go through here and shrink all these bones, shrinks down. Do the head, and you notice I'm going to leave the head to where the head sits inside of that capsule. The neck you can make pretty small. Got to get each one of the backbones done this exact same way. And that's it. So once all the bone shrinks are done and everything is bound, you can actually move the character around. How do you do that again? Well, on the bone layer, make sure the bone layer is selected because that's what we're manipulating. And then to manipulate bones, we have to select the Manipulate Bones tool. Once that's selected, obviously the root bone moves everything. The spine bones, the base spine bone will also move everything in its own way. But then the extra bones here, the subsequent bones, will move each part individually as we've set it up. Pretty cool, right? You can move these guys around. But if you move him up and down, the whole thing moves up and down. Perhaps that's what you want, but there may be times you don't. If I move the foot, it just moves bends the leg around because of how I'm moving the foot. I can move this here and get some action out of that leg like that. It's kind of like inverse kinematics. But there's a cool thing you can do if you want to be able to move the body and leave the feet perfectly in place, and that is called using target bones. So target bones. Target bones allow you to move your character in a much easier way, but also to do things like pin the feet and hands in place if you want to, and that kind of thing. So the first thing we're going to need to do is make sure we're on our bone layer and make sure we're on frame 0. And we're going to add a bone down here by the feet. So I'm going to zoom in, just draw a little bone like so. And then we're going to go to our bone select tool. And all these options come up for it. And the first thing we're going to do is rename that bone left, or target left _ L. And we are going to go ahead and click over here where it says show label. And now we can see that that is our target L. A couple things we want to do first is click on your bone strength, and you can see it's really huge. Actually, target bones don't need any bone strength, any bone strength whatsoever, so we can turn that down to 0. Another important thing is to make sure it's not parented to anything at all. So we can do that by making sure the bone is selected and clicked on reparent bone, and we can see it has no parent of its own. That's what we want. So back on bone selection, We want to click on a blank space to where no bones are highlighted, and we want to click on create or add bone again and do the same thing over here. It doesn't have to be connected to anything or overlaying anything. Just need to make the bone. We click on bone select or select bone. We rename this as target R underscore R. Did I spell that right? I did. Yay. Yay me. We want to make sure we click show label. Don't have to, but it helps if somebody else is working on your file. In my case, nobody does. Nobody touches my stuff. Otherwise, I get mad. Target L and target R. So to make these bones work, we need to select, let's say we're going to start with the right shin bone here. And next thing we need to do is go into bone constraints up here. There's a drop down menu. And this is the right leg, so we need to click the target for it to be target R. So we'll drop that down, and you can see toward the middle here, it says target. We want to make sure we select this drop down and go all the way down to target R, and that takes care of that. We close it, and you'll see now that that target bone, it's kind of hard to see here because it got my bones scaling. They retain their size in the new version of Moho. But there's a little target right here at the end of the bone. The other bones don't have it, but these do, indicating that it is has been successful and it now is a target bone. So we want to make sure that this target bone is being attached to the shin bone. So we'll go to our select bone again, select the other shin bone. We'll go into bone constraints, go down to target, and drop down and select target L. And then we close this out. Now when you move these, we'll just zoom out a little bit, grab our bone manipulation or manipulate bones tool. You can see, for one, we need to take the strength down on this other one. So let's just go ahead and do that. Bone strength, and just select and remove the strength off of that. Target bones have no strength. Anyway, back to the manipulate bones tool. When we move this bone now, it moves the whole leg like a puppet rig, because you're moving the target bone, not the bone itself. You can still select those bones, but the ones with the target bone selected won't move. You can move other bones, but not anything in that chain. If we want to move the foot, we can move the foot because it's below the target bone. So that's a good thing. But this is the coolest part of it. I'm going to zoom this so we can see the whole figure. When we move with the manipulate bones tool, the feet stay in place. So we can do funny little dances like this. In this case, we probably do want his legs to be able to bend whatever way we want to, so we can animate him walking left or right or whatever we want. However, sometimes you might not want this to happen. And the way we take care of that is with bone constraints. If you were to use them, they would do this for you. So we'll just select the bones here, select this bone to make sure this is the one we're going to limit. Bone constraints right here at the top is angle constraints. We click that and you'll see this little sort of bracket appear. This tells you the limit that this bone can go left and right. Normally your leg wouldn't bend backwards like this. So we can take the limit of that one down, and it only is going to go as far as that line is. So if we close this now, you'll see when I move the root bone around, that will never bend the wrong direction as far as if we wanted him to stay kind of in a configuration like this. If he had to walk to the left, though, that would be kind of a weird looking bone. So sometimes you want that and sometimes you don't. I don't believe that property is animatable. I wish it was, that you can just sometimes have that turned on and off. It may be. If I'm wrong, let me know. But as far as I know, it's not. So we're going to select that bone again, and we're going to take off that angle constraint. And now when we move that bone, it can bend backwards and forwards. So we can have him sit in a chair, or we can have him cross his legs like he needs to pee or something. And that will also move to the left and the right. Okay. Animation. Everything up to this point has been done on frame 0. But now we're going to start over here on frame 1. All of our tools are going to kind of change a little bit depending upon what we're going to be selecting and doing, but still on the bone layer, we're going to make this guy do a little aerobics. So let's start here on frame 1. We're going to make automatic keyframes. We're going to select our manipulate bones tool. Just kind of adjust them a little bit, and you can see right here a set of keyframes has appeared. Right now we've got it set to keyframe all the body parts. That may not be what you want later on, but for now that's what we're going to use. And we're going to move ahead in the timeline and create another keyframe. So let's just pick an arbitrary frame of 24, and we're going to make him squat down. Now, if we move the playhead back and forth from 0 to 24, or from 1 to 24, you can see he moves because it's interpolating from frame 1 to 24, filling in all that motion in between those two keyframes. If you move those keyframes closer together, there's less of a distance, i.e. less time it takes to get from here to here, so he will squat faster. But we're going to leave him here for now so we can figure out the timing later. So in frame 1, he's standing, he goes to squat, and in frame 48, let's make him stand up again. We grab the root bone, and we make him stand up. Now, something you're noticing with the feet, we can set those feet to where they don't move, but we can also animate them to where they don't. And I'd rather do that. That way we have the freedom of making them move whenever we want. So while he is squashed, you can see, or squatting, you can see that the feet are angled incorrectly. So we just grab those feet and put them where they go. It creates a keyframe for those after we move them. So now you can see that when he squats, it doesn't mess them up. Right in between, though, there's little strange interpolation of how that works because it's not set to linear, which we're not going to get into in this tutorial. However, if I just pull the feet up a little bit there on that keyframe, now it makes sure that those feet stay straight. Let's just get these right on these keyframes. But I'm going to remove that middle one because we have it set to full body, and I don't want to be having to fix a bunch of keyframes as we go here. So he squats, he stands up. Let's have him squatting. Retime this. At 24, it doesn't look like he's squatting all the way down for some reason now. But let's go ahead and make him squat all the way down the way we wanted him to do. And then he's standing. And then he's going to squat again here at 72. We just pull that down, straighten his feet. And again, at 96, we'll make him standing again. And then we fix his feet on this frame. So now when we play it through or drag through, it's kind of going up and down. Da, 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 da. We're going to fix these again here because I had to make him go farther down. It kind of messed those up. Okay, so now he's squatting up and down. Yay. So let's make him do something else along with this. So as he squats, he's going to come up in the standing position, but he's going to lift one leg in the air. So let's go ahead and grab this leg and grab this foot. But actually, we're going to grab this part of the leg and do like so. And so you can do this in stages. So he squats, he comes up, lifting his leg, but that leg lifts pretty quickly. So right about here in the middle now, maybe we want that only to be halfway up at that point. So we'll just kind of do this. Now when we go back, he kind of has this place where we want it at that time, and then he kicks it all the way up by this point. So by the time he sits down again, that leg is going to be on the ground. It's going to come up this way, and now we're going to make that other leg kick up in the air. I'm grabbing the target bone to do that, you see, because you can move the whole leg around like that. I can also grab the individual bone of the toe and so on, and that works just fine too. So we have him now squat, kick, squat, kick. But remember, about halfway through, we probably want to have this about like this. So kick. And then by the end, let's just have him standing straight up like he was from the beginning, like that. And now we have the guy squatting, kicking, and then he's just standing. Let's add in his arms. Very simple to do. He starts here. When he squats, let's lift his arms up. You can add targets to these too if we had hands, but we don't, so we're not going to worry about it. But it works the same way as the feet. So we have him lifting his arms. So when we squat, his arms go up, and when he kicks, I'm going to have one arm still in the air, a little lower, like so. That way this arm comes down as the leg goes up. It's kind of a natural balancing motion we do. But you notice, this keyframed here in the middle, the whole body. So he's trying to go back to that position. There is a way we can get rid of that. I have to make sure that this is the selected bone. So this is the bone angle and scale and so forth, but it is of every part. What we're going to do is just get rid of the keyframe. Actually, we're just going to add in keyframes back to put his arm back in the air, and that will overwrite the ones that are there. So up, kick, and we want to make sure that the arm is still up, but only comes down on that frame as well. So we can do this kind of thing. And now the arms will be up until he kicks. One comes down as he kicks. The other one comes down to meet the other one. And then we're going to do the same thing now. So he's got the kick here. This one is going to still be in the air. We actually didn't even do the down position, both arms up, so we need to do that. Let's go ahead. But you see how easy this is, though? I'm just going back and fixing it on the frames that it's not right on. It's very simple. So it's not an animation tutorial, but it's a tutorial to show you how easy it is to set up a simple figure, get him rigged for animation, and then do some animation with him. So on this frame, this arm still needs to be in the air. This arm is going to be kind of halfway in the air. And then when he kicks, that one comes down, and then this other one will come down for the end of the animation. We'll roll it back and play the whole thing through, and you can see how that works. And that's that. Another quick thing we can do just for fun is to create another layer. I'm going to close up this folder, the bone layer that has all the parts. We're going to go back to frame 0 because that's where we create everything. And I'm going to create a new vector layer. On this vector layer, this is just going to be our background. This is a non-moving, non-animated background. It should be behind our character, so we're just going to click that layer and drag it down to the bottom, and it'll be behind him. And we're going to add a gradient to this layer. So now that we have that drug behind, we're going to draw a shape onto that layer, because right now there's nothing. It's just an empty layer. We're going to click our Draw Shape tool, and we're going to drag out a shape. But we don't want a circle. So we're going to undo that. We're going to click on the square here, or the rectangle here, and we're just going to drag out a rectangle right behind him. And with this selected, we will need to click Select Shape. Click on the lines. We need to click on Fill, so we have an actual fill here. I happen to have a gradient already selected, but to set that up from scratch, if you were just on plain, it would just come out white like this. We want to drop down here on Effect 1 on the Fill portion and click Gradient, and then this little box will show up. What we'll want to do is now select these little boxes of color. So if you have this one selected, we can select which color we want for that part of the gradient. So I'm just going to select a blue, kind of a darker desaturated blue. That looks like it's going to be my top, but we're going to fix that here in a second too. The middle, I'm going to select a color in the blue range. Something along those lines, probably, maybe a little happier, a little less saturated. And then for this guy, I'm going to go ahead and probably select something white-ish, a really light blue, close to white. Okay, and we can just click this and say, okay, this is a little indicator of what it's like. There are different types of gradients you can use. Radial comes from the center, which is kind of cool. But I want to show you the linear so we can adjust this here. So I say okay. Now you see that weird pattern because we've selected the shape is selected. Just click anywhere with your transform points tool in the background and it'll see what you actually have. However, we need to affect this gradient in a way that flips it or adjusts where it starts and stops. So let's fix that. We were going to select our shape again. And you see this guy right here? This is the way we're going to manipulate where that gradient stops and starts. I'm going to select on a blank area of the canvas. We still are within our shape. Our gradient controls are still available. And I'm just going to pull this down, and you see that it makes that gradient, it adjusts the angle and the fall off and everything for it. I'm going to flip it around this way to where the darker is toward the bottom. And then I can stretch out this guy. That's our kind of like our starting point. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag this out again for a nicer, longer blend. And there we go. That's basically what I was looking for. So just a quick gradient background. You can add another one for, say, like a ground plane. I can show you how to do that too. We'll just click on the transform points to get out of that layer. And we can click on new layer again, vector layer. And we're going to make sure that that one is above our background layer. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to call it sidewalk or something like that. Click OK to apply. And we're going to draw another shape over here with our shape tools. Our draw shape tool. And we're just going to click and drag a rectangle like so. And because we had nothing selected over here, it's just going to come out as a stroke. There was no fill applied evidently. We're going to click on our select shape and click on the line. And once it's highlighted and has that strange pattern to it, we can go ahead and click on fill. And now we can decide on what our colors and our gradient is going to be. And the way we do that is we make sure, because this will normally say plane, it keeps defaulting to gradient on mine. We're going to make sure that this pattern is visible. We're going to go over here to where it says plane. We're going to go down to gradient. And this is just a matter of taste to use a gradient. We'll still be on linear. And we're going to start with our colors here. It doesn't matter which way they're arranged because we can always change it, flip it, and rotate it later. So I'm going to just, for the whitest color, I'm going to pick kind of a gray. And you can see that happening on my screen below there. I'm going to say OK. For the middle color, I'm going to click kind of a darker gray and say OK. And for the dark black color, I'm going to go ahead and leave it black just for the sake of doing it and click OK. Now, with the select shape tool selected, we're going to click on the blank part of the canvas. And now I'm going to adjust these points of my gradient. We don't want the black to the back, I don't think, so I'm going to go ahead and move it, flip this around where the black's toward the bottom. And we're going to drag the other point up and then drag the bottom point down again. And it starts increasing our smoothness of our fade there because the points are more gradually going from the darker color to the lighter color. And that's it. You can see that when you click on something, though, it updates, like it makes that background white. And then when you let go, though, you finally see what it's going to be. That's okay. It's just kind of a glitch of the program, in my opinion. And there we are. So now when we play this forward, we've got our little guy dancing. And when we stop, that gray comes back. Now, when you render this out, it will look just like it does here with the colors and everything in place. That preview you saw while we were playing it back is just a preview, so it turns off some of the colors and some of the effects and stuff too during that time. When we're ready to render this out as a little animation, we'll just go to File, Export Animation. We'll set up, what our start frame is, what our end frame is going to be. In this case, it's going to be 120. So I'm just going to knock that back to 120. And then we decide on our format. Video and MP4 is fine. This is where you can just upload it to YouTube or wherever you need to. If you need an image sequence because you're going to take it into After Effects or something like that, you can do that for further editing. And these are a bunch of different render options that we don't necessarily have to get into, but these are all set good by default. We'll just give it a title. We'll call this Stickman. I'm going to put it on my desktop, which is just one of the default settings, or it's the main default setting, or you can go and choose a folder to put it somewhere in particular. And then you can choose configuration. I'm just going to use what it's set at as a default, and we click OK, and it renders out. And while it does that, it'll be doing this nifty number, and then it'll close. Then it will open up your video and play it once through, which it did on my other monitor. So anyway, it will play it back for you, and it will look exactly like this, only better because you'll have all of your colors and all your good stuff going. All right, well, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and there'll be more tutorials coming soon.